been invited to a house party. While you were there, you noticed the male occupant of the house has been spending all of his time with a specific female. Throughout the course of the night, every time the female's cup is empty, the male ensures that it is filled again. Toward the end of the night, the female, obviously drunk, is led upstairs by the male into his bedroom. The first question is a sexual assault imminent?
Yeah, so originally when we were doing this project, I thought I was going to have a much more certain answer by the time we got around to the final interview. And I still don't know whether a sexual assault's imminent, but I also don't think it matters. Not in the sense of like, oh, I shouldn't care, but in the sense of if I don't know, I shouldn't be acting like I know. I should be acting like I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. And would you intervene in this situation?
Yeah, I would. Similar to your answers and a number of the people that came before us, I realized that the intervention should come long before the woman is being pulled upstairs. That I've come somewhat to the conclusion that if you've waited that long, you've already failed in any sort of service that you wanted to render to that individual. Like, you've made it so that it's a fight. You've made it into a fight, whereas it could have been not a fight. It could have been something that could have been resolved with human connection, caring, empathy, emotion, value, these kinds of things. And yeah, I definitely would intervene. And similarly to what, like, I think Anna was the first individual we interviewed that really brought this out. Intervention should be talking to the male and the female privately or together or whatever, and not engaging in a threatening way, but trying to say, look, this is me caring about what's happening. I don't want to be part of this. If something bad is going down and beyond the selfish layer, I don't want this to happen to someone ever. And if it's easily within my power to, or my ability, more accurately, to intervene, then I ought to.
Yeah. What would the intervention look like for you now?
Yeah, I mean, so, partially it's speaking, if this guy is personally getting up to go refill the drink, then that presents an opportunity to step forward and say something as simple as like, hey, how are you? Or, do you know this individual? Or do you feel comfortable? Or, like these kinds of questions stated out of the blue can seem a little bit weird and maybe not as successful, but you could just engage the individual in a conversation and somewhat subtly or subversively determine their state of inebriation, try to determine whether they know this individual. If you get the immediate brush off of, I'm here with someone else, go away, then maybe that's somewhat of an indication of there's a relationship of trust between them. I don't want to interrupt someone's idea of a good time, but also my care for interruption of someone's good time should not be is not an adequate excuse to avoid interrupting what will be a very bad time for at least one of them.
Yeah.
Probably, anyways.
Yeah. And why do you choose to react the way you do?
Yeah, a lot of it is selfish. I don't want to. I think his name is Mario Salvio or Mario Silvo, something like that. Is this notion of like when the operation of a system becomes so unpleasant that you can't take part, you can't even passively take part. I don't want to even passively take part in allowing that situation to unfold. and it's not by virtue of my dominance over the situation that it's being allowed. It's by virtue of my inaction that it's being allowed. So a lot of it's selfish. There's some fair portion of it where, when practically possible and not too intense of inputs are required from me, that I almost feel like I have a duty to help others when possible. It's not, I don't quite believe in duty, but it gets very close to that idea of if all it takes is a few lines of conversation, then then I feel personally obligated to do so. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any confounding variables in the hypothetical situation?
Yeah. Especially when we first asked the question, and partially this is why we constructed the question in this way, or the hypothetical situation this way, was notions of class privilege, like the male is the occupant of the house, and so it's this notion of you don't have a right to say anything there because you don't have power in that place. That was a confounding variable. Definitely, I was concerned about the nature of the relationship between the two individuals, and that remains somewhat of a concern still, but not nearly as much. And let's see, the notions of just privacy in general, of privacy and propriety, those are definitely confounding variables in there. The notion of fear, that's a confounding variable for sure, of like how much danger am I putting myself in, even if it's not real danger. It's the nature of fear where we tend to inflate it to a greater proportion than it actually is in reality. Yeah, there's definitely a number of them in those, and then in the questions as well.
Okay. Does the relationship between the male and the female matter, ultimately?
Yeah, so like as I kind of already alluded to, it's less of a concern now. It's still something that is part of the thought process, but in the end, I can't know without engaging with them what the relationship is. Even with engaging with them, I can't know for sure that I'm not just being lied to or conned or whatever, and what kind of duplicity is going on. But what I can know is that regardless of what their relationship is, that my compulsion to action is not, get confused here on my words. I feel compelled to act in both situations. And so, kind of as I said before, I shouldn't be acting like I know that they're in a relationship and therefore not doing something. I shouldn't be acting like I know that he is violently raping her and therefore dragging her out of the house by force. I should be acting like I don't know and determining what the relationship is. That like back on that, on the questions themselves, like that was one of the biggest changes I've noticed since the first time we interviewed through all the other people and to this point now where, as I said before, I feel like I've failed if I let it get to the point where she's being pulled upstairs.
What stood out to you as the main differences between the female versus male responses to the questions?
Yeah. The first one I noticed between yours and my initial responses, and then was basically reinforced with every male-bodied response, was that almost everyone's response, except maybe Stephen's, was couched in the notion of how threatening can I be? Of can I be the individual who backs this guy down, or who postures himself up big enough to let this guy know that he can't get away from me, get away with this act here. This is my domain, kind of notion. And the moment, like Anna's interview was definitely something that really stood out in comparison to the previous four, or yeah, I think four people came forward. It's because her answers were so starkly different, and it was in her responses, and then subtly in other people's responses, this notion of like, take care of it before it's a problem. Make sure that there's a sense of connection between you and the male and the female, whoever you are, and yeah.
Are there any problems with our methodology, with the approach of this project?
Yeah. Well, so as we're gonna cover, I guess, in the intro video or whatever, about our methodology, we purposefully kept people in the dark about the question, and this was because we were seeking honest responses. But the problem with that was that this meant that we could only ask people who trusted us, which means we left out a lot of individuals by virtue of the people who we select to be friends, and might give a very skewed perspective on the relevance or care that individuals, especially male-bodied individuals, have for this issue. I imagine if you or I had interviewed a number of our friends from Ohio, we'd have gotten much more like, no, I'm going to kind of root for the guy type of answers. So I think that's a flaw in our methodology. I think I feel like ideally I would have liked to have interviewed a lot more people. This project's already too long, and going to be somewhat of a burden to the people watching it. But I think 12 interviews covering 10 people is a pretty small sample size, and not kind of controlling environmental factors like the room and stuff like that, making people more comfortable. And I think that it was really worthwhile to have the vague hypothetical situation, because a lot of the point of the project is, at least for me, was like the article that we read, and how this individual had a situation that was glaringly obvious that made it a lot easier to act in. We wanted to present a situation that was a lot harder to act in. But also, I think there's a value in deliberately injecting vagueness, but that's not the world we live in. Like, I don't really go to house parties, and when I do, I almost know everyone there, and if I don't, I'm usually learning who those people are. And we live in Portland, where a house party is probably a one-story kind of event, or a two-story event, or something like that. Like, more, like, a lot of individuals live in apartments where it's very difficult to actually sequester someone in private. Like, there's a lot of contextual concerns that are not very real, at least for how I live life in our hypothetical situation. And so I would have liked to have expanded on that, but it's not a doctoral research thesis where we can devote thousands of hours to it, so yeah. Time constraints and all. Yeah.
All right. That's it.
I had wanted to say, nah, never mind. It's good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.